I honestly can't believe it. How is one of Excel's most useful functions still so unknown? The modern and very clever ifs function is right here hiding in plain sight, and it's easy to master, especially after I show you these two key ideas. Now, don't get me wrong, the classic if function is great, but it quickly becomes overwhelming when there's more than two things you want to write. Think about changing number grades to letter grades using if. The formula is a nightmare. Now, look how ifs streamlines everything. This is a better way to excel. I'm Mario Strada, and in this video, we'll be analyzing Super Bowl ad data. And in about 4 minutes, you'll know the ifs function. Whether you're continuing from part 1 or jumping in fresh, I've got you covered on what you need to know. So welcome to Hot Sheets. Don't tell your boss. A 30-second Super Bowl ad costs a jaw-dropping $7 million. With stakes this high, brands aim straight for our emotions. While most brands play it safe with humor, just a quarter of ads flirt with sex appeal. But some brands are more daring when it comes to sexy themes. We get that sexy sells, but it's tricky not to go too far on TV. So, are these ads blending sexy with funny, or just sticking to one vibe? To find out, we'll need some data. I've collected data on the 9 highest spending brands on Super Bowl ads from 2000 to 2020. First, we have the 9 brands. Then we have the total number of ads, the percent of those ads that were funny, and the percent that were sexy. To be clear, a single ad can be both funny and sexy. Let's answer our first question. Which brands really turn up the heat with sex appeal in their Super Bowl ads? To do that, let's introduce a sexy meter. If a brand features sexy themes in 40% or more of its ads, we'll call that high. Anything from 20% to just under 40%, that's medium. And then under 20%, let's call that low. To see what's ahead, let's use the same high, medium, low cutoffs for a funny meter. You don't have to understand this formula, but I do want you to see its shape. And that's no surprise. 8 out of 9 brands are high on the funny meter, with Coca-Cola being the medium oddball. But for now, let's leave Excel for 2 minutes to visualize what the ifs function really does, and then learn how to write the formula in Excel. In part 1, we learn how to build an if machine. First, we give it a true-false question. Call it a test. The machine's job is to determine if the answer to that test is true or false. If true, the machine writes something. But if false, the machine writes something else. And that's it. Have the machine take the test, and depending on the answer, write one of 2 options. But let's get smarter. Let's make an ifs machine. The first part is the same. We'll present a true-false question. For example, percent of sexy ads is greater than 40%. If that's true, the machine writes high. But if false, instead of writing something else, the machine moves on to a new test. The second test could be percent of ads is greater than 20%. If true, it writes medium. But if false, it moves to the third test. Percent of ads is less than or equal to 20%. If true, write low. If false, and there's no other test, the machine simply stops. Now let's see our ifs machine in action using Doritos ad data. First test. 24% is greater than 40%. Is that true or false? Since it's false, the machine moves on to the next test. 24% is greater than 20%. Now that's true, so the machine writes medium and stops there. It won't move on to the third test. Earlier I said there are 2 key things you need to know about ifs. Here's the first. The order of your test is crucial because the machine stops as soon as it hits the true test. Let's look at Bud Light, where 46% of ads have a sexy theme. To illustrate the point, let's switch the first and the second test. So the machine's first test is 46% is greater than 20%. Since that's true, the machine writes medium and stops. But that's wrong. We want high. Keeping this example in mind, be sure your tests are in the order that matches your intent. Now, writing a formula in Excel is pretty straightforward. Let's repeat our ifs machine out loud. If the first test is true, write high. If the second test is true, write medium. If the third test is true, write low. Notice the word if pops up 3 times. Let's just keep the first one and make it plural by adding an S. Now, let's get rid of some of those extra words. We're left with ifs, test 1, high, test 2, medium, test 3, low. And that's the basic structure of an ifs formula. All right, back to Excel. So to fill out our sexy meter column, we'll type equals ifs, open parentheses. The first test is percent of videos with sexy themes is greater than 40%. If that's true, write high. And since high is text inside of a formula, put high in quotes. Okay, that completes the first test. So, comma. Then the second test, check if percent of videos with sexy themes is greater than 20%. Then comma. And if true, we'll write medium in quotes. Now finish up with the last test. Percent of videos with sexy themes is less than or equal to 20%. Comma, and write low if true. Hit enter, and it works. Bud Light ranks high on the sexy meter. When we copy the formula all the way down and add a little color, you'll see Bud Light along with Kia and Pepsi are all high on sexy. But let's dive deeper. Remember, these three brands are also scoring high on the funny meter. So what's the strategy? Are their sexy ads exclusively relying on appeal, or are they mixing in humor too? Let's find out, but we'll need a breakdown of this data. Instead of looking at overall percentages, we're going to examine each ad individually for our three highlighted brands: year, brand, whether the ad had a funny theme, and whether the ad had a sexy theme. In the last two columns, a 1 means yes and a 0 means no. Using ones and zeros like this is pretty common in data. And last, we'll plan to add a new column to label each ad as just funny, just sexy, or both. But first, let's build an IFS machine since we're working with three possible labels. And for each label, we'll need a test. Our first test will determine if an ad is both funny and sexy. The test is funny theme equals 1 and sexy theme equals 1. When that test is true, the machine writes both. The second test is for funny. Here, we only need funny equals 1. We could say and sexy equals 0, but since the first test already covers a scenario where sexy is 1, we don't need to specify sexy as 0 here. It's the only other possibility. Remember, order matters. Finally, the third test identifies just sexy ads. It's simply sexy equals 1. When true, the machine writes sexy. Otherwise, it stops. Now let's translate our machine into an Excel formula. Start by saying it out loud. If funny theme equals 1 and sexy theme equals 1, write both. If funny theme equals 1, write funny. If sexy theme equals 1, write sexy. Let's form an ifs function. We'll keep the first if and add an s, then get rid of some of the extra words. And we're closer to our Excel formula. The last thing is to turn the and in the first test into an and box. So we'll put the and to the front and fill it with the two conditions that need to be true. Finally, we have our formula structure ready for Excel. But I will tell you this now, there is a problem with our formula. That's key point number 2, but rather than telling, I'll show it. So now we can type equals ifs, open parentheses, our first test, let's set up our and box, let's stuff it with our two conditions, funny theme is 1, comma, and sexy theme is 1. Make sure you close the and box. Now if that test is true, write both. Then the second test, funny theme is 1. When true, write funny. Then the last test, sexy theme is 1. When true, write sexy. Okay, that looks to have worked for Bud Light, but here's key point number 2. Watch this. If I apply the same formula to the next ad, we get an error. Here's why. That ad is neither funny nor sexy. We can take care of the error in two ways. The first is to build one more and box with funny theme equals 0 and sexy theme equals 0 and have it write neither. But the second is what I really want to highlight. If you ever want to catch all for any scenario not captured by the first 3 tests, simply write a new test at the end that you know will always be true, like 1 equals 1. Then write neither. Side note, if you're comfortable with the notion of true false, instead of 1 equals 1, you can just write true. But for now, let's keep it at 1 equals 1. Now this test is ready to drag down the dataset. So now for each brand, we can count the number of ads that fall into our different categories. And the results are pretty clear. There are hardly any standalone sexy ads. Even daring brands need humor to cut the tension. That completes our 2-part If series. If you like this video, know that we're a new channel and that every time you like, comment, and subscribe, we get to reach more people just like you. So with that, I'm Mario Estrada, this is Hot Sheets, and we'll see you next time.